this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about Wasteland Warfare. This is our second episode in the How to Play series, and this is going to be our first episode on actions. We're actually going to end up breaking actions up into probably 2 or 3 total episodes. We'll see how this goes. I'm trying to keep these pretty light and manageable rather than having these big hour-long info dumps, and this way you can more easily navigate and find what you need to. Before we dig in, I'd just like to say if you are interested in Wasteland Warfare or you already have models and just don't have dice, there's an Amazon link in the description. If you use that to get your dice, it won't cost you anything extra, and it does give me a little kickback. That is going to give you 2 of each of the effects dice, and then 1 armor die, and then 1 skill test die. You can see the white skill test and the red armor dice. I have this exact set. I bought them not that long ago when I started getting back into Wasteland Warfare because I no longer had my starter set, obviously. So, again, if you're interested, it's there. I appreciate it. Thank you. So, we're going to talk about actions. We're going to talk about the move action, the shoot action, and the combat action. I'm going to take a pretty in-depth look at all of these actions. Like I said, I want to keep this fairly light and manageable, so we're going to cover the rest in another video. And we're going to cover damage in its own video as well. And this way we are able to look at each action in a little bit more detail than we normally would if we were just going to do a broad overview. So for today, we're going to start with movement, which just moves the model. And then we're talking about how to make ranged attacks, and that's going to be with a pistol, a rifle, or a heavy weapon. We're not going to dig into thrown weapons too much today. It's going to need its own special kind of video and probably gonna get lumped in when we start talking more about scatter and things of that nature. We're going to talk about charging and all of the things that can come from charging. Just like in the combat section, you can see there, we'll talk about the charge bonuses, the battle cry, we'll talk about withdrawing and sliding, and making melee attacks. The move action. This one is actually going to be one of the most simple and straightforward. Each unit's movement is in the upper left-hand corner of the unit card. You can see on the screen there's a green circle. Inside that green circle, you see a red square, and then that red square has a black triangle. But yeah, it's basically just a colored square with a triangle. If you're older like me, it just looks like an old play button on your VCR or DVD player. In it, the color of the square indicates the movement distance. Remember, I'll put a card up right now, but in my last video, we talked about the rulers and colors and the distance, etc. So the color of the square indicates the movement distance, and the pictured example of the enslaved tech, this one moves red, and I believe red is 6 inches, so that just means it moves 6 inches. So you could play this with your own ruler if you wanted to, or measuring tape. Because of how things move, it could get a little wonky because you don't measure front to front like you do in, say, Warhammer. You actually just leapfrog the ruler. So to measure movement, you put the ruler up against the front of the base, and then you move the model all the way over the ruler so that the ruler is touching the back of the base. So you measure front to back, you leapfrog, however you need to say it to remember it, but that's how it works. And again, there's a picture on the screen of it. You don't have to move the whole distance, and you can move through friendly models, but you may not move through enemy models. And movement is found on page 15 of the PDF, and I'm going to do a standalone video on terrain and moving through terrain and stuff. Like all that'll get covered all together. A shoot action is used when you want to make a ranged attack with one of your ranged weapons. In order to use a shoot action, the model must have the skill that corresponds to the weapon being used. So if you have a rifle, you have to have the rifle skill, and you'll understand when you see them. If you want to use a rifle, it has to have the rifle skill. The rifle skill is annotated by a little rifle icon. Same with pistols, right? The pistol skill is annotated by a pistol icon, etc. So it's very straightforward. Yes, it uses a lot of visual symbols instead of just words, but I think that's more of just a space saver because of how things work in this game. But overall, you've got to have whatever skill that corresponds to the weapon you're using. If you don't have the skill, you can't use the weapon. Then, in order to make the ranged attack, you must check your range and line of sight to target. The target must be a model or a combat, meaning multiple models engaged, or a specific point on the battlefield. So if you're targeting a range or a melee, like if you're targeting a combat, that's got its own set of special rules. And again, that'll probably also just get its own video. That'll be a quicker one, but I don't want to dig into it and just overload you with information. For now, all you need to know is that you can target a model, you can target melee or a specific point on the battlefield. Basically, you just have to pick something that you can see and say, this is my target. To find the range of a weapon, you look at the range rulers indicated on the weapon card. If you look at our assault rifle on the screen, you'll notice that it has two ruler color indicators. The left side is a red ruler, and that is your short range. So the short range is the one on the left. The one on the right is the green ruler for the assault rifle. That is your long range. You add those together to get your long range. It's not my short range is red, my long range is green. It's my short range is red, but my long range is red plus green. So the easiest way to think about it, if you want to look at it in terms of inches, is that the red ruler is 0 to 6 inches, and then the red plus green would be anything that's 6 to 14 because the green is 18. So your assault rifle has a maximum range of 14 inches. I hope that helps. If you look, you're going to see little bonus dice corresponding to those ranges. That's just bonuses you get when you're targeting things in that range, and they are not cumulative. So if you're in short range, if you're only in red or 6 inches, you get one additional black effect die, which is a damage die, and one additional green effect die, which is an accuracy die. That being said, if you're in long range, you just get the black damage die. You don't get the green accuracy die. So it's whatever range you're in, you only get the effect dice that correspond to that range. I'm really thankful for this. Wasteland Warfare has a very clear definition of line of sight. There are games out there that do not. An attacker has line of sight if a straight line can be drawn from any portion of the attacking model's base to any portion of the target model's base. Or this could also, like I said before, be an object or point on the battlefield. And if it does so without passing through any objects that are designated as line of sight blocking or obscuring, if you're coming from 40K, that would be the term we would use. But it's line of sight blocking. If it passes through anything that's line of sight blocking, you can't see it. If it doesn't pass through anything that's line of sight blocking, then you can. Models that are on bases that are 60 millimeter or larger are huge models, and huge models, they block line of sight the way a line of sight blocking piece of terrain would. So if you're on the other side of a sentry bot, that sentry bot is going to block line of sight. So you could actually use your sentry bot, if you have one, for example, to screen your weaker models as it moves up the battlefield so that your opponent has to shoot the sentry bot because it can't see through it to get to the people behind it. Models that are smaller than 60 millimeter do not block line of sight but may grant cover. This does mean that you are not punished for having dynamically posed models. Cover, if you need to determine cover, what you do is you draw a cover line from the center of the attacker's base to the center of the defender's base. And then every object that that cover line fully passes through, meaning enters and exits, grants cover. So if I'm standing on something and that cover line doesn't pass all the way through it in order to get to the center of my base, then I don't get cover for that thing. Cover is ignored if the attacker's base is touching the object that a cover line passes through, but it's only ignored for the attacker. And the easiest way to think about that is if cover line passes through a wall, I can ignore that wall when I'm shooting out by touching it, but I'd still get cover because my opponent's not touching it. And again, if you just think about it like I'm at the corner of a wall and I'm just peering or pieing around the corner so that I can shoot out and then ducking back in. Like that's kind of how you think about these things. It's if you're touching it, you're just using it in a way that allows you to shoot out but still use the cover when you're taking return fire. If you think about it like that, it all makes sense. What cover does do for you is it gives you a -2 cover modifier on the skill value of the attacker. So if I'm in cover and you're shooting me, it's -2 to your skill value. But it's for each object that the cover line passes through. So if there's two or three low walls that are between us, you could have a -8, right? Or a -6 because of the total number of objects that the cover line passes through. Cover also increases the target's armor by 1, but that is not cumulative. It's only applied once. So basically, if you've got on the screen, if you've got 4 pieces of cover between the attacker and you, the attacker has a -8 penalty to their skill value, but you still only get +1 to your armor. If the attacker's cover line passes through a non-friendly model, meaning non-friendly to the attacker, then the target also receives cover. And that basically means you could actually use your models as a meat shield to give your other models cover. So you could put something with heavier armor in front that could absorb some of these shots a little bit better and put your lightly or unarmored people behind that target so that you're taking cover behind the heavier armored models. Like I said, terrain and area terrain are going to get its full separate video. I'm not going to go through each individual terrain rule in this video. Power armor does not get the armor bonus as of the Nuka World update. That's also important. You will get the hit roll penalty, but you won't get the armor bonus. So if I'm targeting a Brotherhood of Steel Knight in his battle armor or his power armor, excuse me, I would still get the -2 to my hit penalty if he has cover, but that Brotherhood Knight would not receive the +1 to the armor save because it's in power armor. Let's talk about charge actions. A charge action is the only way to get into combat or base to base for the most part. There's going to be a couple exceptions. The charge distance is located next to the move on the upper left-hand corner of the card, and it has 2 triangles. Again, for us old people, that's a fast forward symbol, right? So to make a charge action, you cannot already be in combat. So if you're already in base to base with an opposing model, you can't charge. You can't charge from one combat to another. You must end the charge action in base to base with an opposing model. You must have line of sight to the target of the charge before you make the charge. So what that means is if you can't see what it is you're trying to charge, you can't charge it. Now, remember that charging is just an action and you can mix and match your actions. So you could move out of cover so that you could see your target and then you could charge the target. But then you've used both your actions and you won't have a fight action. And that all kind of plays into the action economy of the game. Once you have completed the charge, which is as soon as you enter base to base, you place a green charge bonus marker next to the model. And that's the green charge bonus markers are either green or black pentagons. They're going to be, you'll see them in a minute. Or you can use the battle cry if you have that ability, which we're going to cover at the end. I know it says battle cry will get its own separate video, but I decided to lump it in here just because it was very relevant to what we're doing today. When you complete a charge, you may receive a charge bonus. You place the token down either green or black side up. You can see the tokens on the screen there. The token is removed if you perform any actions other than a close combat action that targets the same model that you have charged. Basically, if you do anything, the tokens come off. If you perform an action, they come off. If your action is to attack the target that you charged, then they are removed. The difference being if you attack the target that you charged, you get to use them. So each token has an effect die or is an effect die that can be added to the attack. So if you place the black token, you get the black damage die added to the attack as long as that attack targets the target of your charge. And then the green one is the effect die. And remember that you can only have a maximum of 4 dice per color on a skill test. So if you've got those 3 or 4, if you have 4 green dice already for whatever reason, there's no reason for you to take the green charge bonus marker because it'll just fall off. You just use the black one then. Now that you are engaged, this is a great segue. Let's talk about close combat. When you are engaged, which is base to base, a model uses close combat attacks, except for, when they don't. It's just one of those where the book had some funny wording because it was like, you must use close combat attacks. And then it's like 2 paragraphs down, it's like, you could also just use ranged attacks. Stop using definitive action, and this isn't Modifius specific. It's just stop using definitive language for things that are not definitive. A close combat attack may only target models in base to base with the attacker. Again, there are exceptions. Super mutants have some rules that allow other things to happen. A close combat action is a skill test. And again, we talked about how to do skill tests in that video. I already did a card for it. I'm not going to do another one. Just like with shooting, you must have the skill that corresponds to the weapon. All melee weapons that I've seen just have the dagger symbol. Just like with shooting, you gain effect dice that correspond to the weapon being used. So again, if you'll have a weapon card, it'll have effect dice. The only difference is there's no range. If the attacker is strength 7 or higher, the attacker adds 1 bonus damage die, which is the black one, to the attack. If the target of the attack is outnumbered, meaning it's engaged with multiple enemies, then the attacker gains a bonus accuracy die. So let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. Let's say I charge you with a raider in power armor and he's got a strength of 8, or she, doesn't matter. That raider has a strength of 8. I have charged you. So because that raider is strength 8, it'll gain 1 black damage die in addition to whatever its weapon has. I can also add 1 black or 1 green die as my charge bonus. And then if the target of that charge, let's say my raider is charging an Institute Gen 1 synth, which is already engaged with a scaver. So because that Gen 1 synth is already engaged with the scaver, once my raider and power armor gets there, I also just get an additional green die. So my total dice pool for this scenario would be 1 green die for being outnumbered, 1 additional black die for being strength 7 or higher, and then either a green or a black die for charging, plus whatever's on the melee weapon card. If you don't have a melee weapon and you're just doing slaps, you use the improvised weapon profile, 1 green effect die, and it does 1 damage. Not a damage die, it's just 1 damage. And I will cover damage types and damage profiles definitely in the next video as we cover armor and damage and some of the other actions. You may choose to use a ranged weapon in combat, and that's any of them. Doesn't matter the type. So you could use a thrown weapon, you could use rifle, pistol, doesn't matter. You can do that for a close combat attack, but the attack is made as if the target was receiving cover from 1 object, which is to say you're going to have -2 to hit, and the target's going to have +1 to save. And then if the weapon has a minimum range, then it can't be used while it's engaged. The anti-material rifle, I believe it is, has a minimum range. Sniper rifles have a minimum range. So those things wouldn't be able to be used while they're engaged. In addition to all that, there's special movement that can be done while you're engaged. And the first one we're going to talk about is the movement that happens when you perform a close combat action. So when you perform a close combat action, you make your attacks, and then you can perform a slide. And a slide follows all the normal rules for movement, meaning you have to go around enemy models. You could go through enemy or friendly models. A model performing a slide must remain engaged with all models it is currently engaged with. And really, what that means is if you're engaged with 2 or 3 models, you're not going to be able to do a slide. I'd have to really sit down and look at it on the table, but I can't think of a single way that you could perform a slide if you're engaged with 2 models or more. But it can be used, can to move into engagement with another model. So I could charge my raider into a scaver or a ghoul or whatever. I could charge my raider into a ghoul, and then I could wrap after I make my attacks. If that ghoul doesn't die, I could slide to get all the way around the ghoul, and then tag another ghoul so that I'm tying up 2 ghouls if I wanted to. And it is part of the close combat action. It is not a separate action or a quick action. It is all just part of the combat action, but it happens after making the attack. So here's the order of operations. The model activates. The model uses its first action to make an attack. It'll roll its skill test, and then you'll resolve damage, etc. The model will then perform a slide with which it could engage another model if possible with the slide. Now you've only used one action so far, so now the model could then use the second action to perform an attack either against the previous target or the new target that the slide brought into an engagement range. The model may then slide again with the second close combat action, provided it remains engaged with all models it is currently engaged with. And it doesn't say you have to end the slide in engagement. It says you cannot break engagement while making the slide. So you couldn't slide into something, be engaged with 2 models, make an attack, and then slide around another one, but like almost do a 360 to where you're on the other side. You have to stay engaged with everything the whole time for the duration of the slide. And that's how slides work. So now we're going to talk about withdrawing from engagement. So if you're in combat and you want to get out of combat, that is called a withdraw. And it's just a regular move action to leave base to base contact with all enemies you are currently engaged with. And it must be a move. It can't be a charge, again, because you're in base to base contact. Every model you are currently engaged with gets to make a free quick action to make a close combat attack against the withdrawing model. Models that are engaged with another model other than the withdrawing one may not make the attack. And all that really means is that if you're a D&D player, this is going to make sense. Because all it means is that if you're going to withdraw from combat, I get a reactionary attack against you, right? So all my 3rd edition old heads out there, they'll know what this is. You're going to fall back. I'm going to get a free attack on you. It is a quick action, so it'll be -2 to hit. But if you've got a buddy that's also touching me, then I don't get to make those attacks. So you could shut off reactionary like fallback attacks by simply making sure other things are touching what you're trying to get away from. Just some kind of things to keep in mind while you're playing. So I saved Battle Cry for last. Like I said, I was going to do a whole video on Battle Cry, but then I was like, man, this really does pertain to the actions that we're going over today. So we're going to go over it. Battle Cry is a special, almost like a passive action that can be used when you charge. You do this instead of just automatically getting a charge bonus token. So if you Battle Cry, you don't get the tokens yet. And then Battle Cry is annotated by a colored circle with a fist in it. There's a picture on the screen. A white circle means you have the Resist Battle Cry skill, which is also on the screen. And if there is a red line through the icon, the unit has Battle Cry immunity. All of this is pretty straightforward in terms of what it is. When you want to perform a Battle Cry, after moving into base contact, you resolve an opposed skill test, and it is Battle Cry versus Resist Battle Cry, and the player with the highest successful die roll wins. So, and again, an opposed skill test is going to be you both make a relevant skill check. So I would make the Battle Cry, you would make the Resist Battle Cry, and then whoever's die is higher and still successful wins. Meaning, if I roll a 5 and a 5 is successful, and you roll a 3 and a 3 is successful, I win because my die roll is higher. If the charger wins, the charge does not count as a trigger for the defender, and that'll get covered when we talk about reactions and quick actions, etc. The charger receives both a green and black charge bonus token. So if the battle cry goes off, you get both dice. And then after engaging the defender, the succeeding after engaging the defender and succeeding the battle cry test, the charger performs a pushback on the defender up to the distance equal to the color of the battle cry skill. If the defender wins the battle cry test and the charger gains no benefits, the defender may also, if they win, immediately use a reaction to move their model out of engagement with the charger without giving the charger a free attack. So you get a free withdraw if you win the battle cry test. Let's talk about what all this means. The pushback. So if you make the battle cry check, you win it as the charger, you can do a pushback. And it's a special movement, and it's used when a skill or ability specifies. So a pushback isn't its own separate action. It's just tied to whatever action or ability triggered the pushback. And it's only used, like I said, when it specifies. The pushing model pushes the target model a maximum distance of the pushback color. So for this example, it'll be the battle cry icon color. So if the battle cry, like in the example up above on the screen there, is yellow, then you could push them back up to yellow. The model being pushed will move in a straight line directly away from the pushing model. And the way to determine this is you effectively are just going to use a cover line to determine what a straight line directly away is. You'll go from the center of the pusher's base to the center of the pushed base, and then they have to follow that line. The pusher may then move their model with the target, and that's a may. You don't have to. So you could actually just follow up that push, little Blood Bowl terminology, right? You get the push, you can follow it up. You may then move your model with the target so that they remain base to base with the defender. And then the pushback movement stops if the defender comes into contact with other models or scenery. If a pushback is part of an attack, you'll resolve the damage first before resolving the push. And so the way I understand this all to work is basically this is all part of the charge. So you're going to charge, and then while you charge, you're going to declare whether or not you're going to use your battle cry if you have it, or if you're just going to take your charge bonus. And then if you use your battle cry, you'll resolve the battle cry. And then if you have an action left, you can still fight. That is how I understand this all to work. If you understand it to work differently, let me know in the comments. But this is what I'm seeing when I read it. That's going to wrap it up for today. Next episode, we're going to take a look at more actions. We're going to look at expertise, quick actions, reactions. We're also going to dig into armor and damage. We're going to do all of it in one big chunk. We'll start with the armor and damage because it's going to be a good segue from this video to that one, and then we'll carry on. Big shout out to Kevin. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate the support. The real Donnie G, you are an OG, buddy. I appreciate you. Phoenix, Jamie, thanks a lot. And the Immortals, Lord Wellingstone, Danny Boy, and Captain Too Tall, you guys are awesome. Appreciate you.